After I sold my business and gave my son $100,000 for his dream home, my daughter-in-law locked me out during a storm, screaming, "You've served your purpose." My grandchild watched through the window crying while she said, "Let the old hag freeze." But later that night, she found the security camera footage had been forwarded to someone who could. I stood on that porch in the freezing rain, my fist pounding against the glass door until my knuckles went numb, and through the streaked window I could see my grandson Caleb pressing his tiny hands against the glass from the inside, his face crumpled and red from crying, and behind him stood Emily with her arms crossed and that cold expression I'd seen her use on telemarketers and door-to-door salespeople, but never thought she'd turn on me. "Emily, please open the door." I shouted over the thunder that rolled across the sky like drums announcing the end of something. She stepped closer to the door, close enough that I could see every detail of her face twisted in contempt, and she spoke clearly enough that I could read her lips even through the glass and the rain. "You've served your purpose, Helena," she said, her voice muffled but unmistakable. "You helped us buy this house, and that's all we needed from you." I felt my heart drop into my stomach, that sick plummeting sensation like when you miss a step going downstairs in the dark. "I'm your family," I managed to say, my voice breaking. "I'm Caleb's grandmother." Emily actually laughed at that, a sharp, bitter sound that cut through the storm. "You're a burden is what you are," she said, and then she reached down and grabbed Caleb by the shoulder, yanking him away from the window even as he reached for me crying, "Grandma, Grandma." And she looked right at me with eyes like chips of ice, and said the words that would replay in my head for days afterward, "Let the old hag freeze." Then she pulled the curtains closed, and I was alone on that porch with nothing but the storm and the darkness pressing in around me. I'm Helena Ward and I'm 62 years old, which isn't ancient by any measure, but apparently old enough to be disposable once my bank account had served its purpose. And I'll be the first to admit I've always had this terrible habit of trying to fix everything with money, because that's how I built my business after my husband died, just throwing money and time and effort at problems until they went away. And maybe that made me naive, or maybe it made me an easy target, but either way it meant I'd handed over $100,000 for the down payment on this house, without really thinking through what strings I should have attached or what protections I should have demanded. I'd spent 40 years building Ward Hardware from a single struggling shop into a neighborhood institution with 3 locations, and I'd learned to read contracts and negotiate deals and spot a bad investment from a mile away. But somehow when it came to my own son Daniel and his wife Emily, I'd let my guard down completely, let myself believe that family meant something more than a transaction. That was my first mistake, that stubborn blind optimism that made me think love and generosity would be returned in kind. And my second mistake was being too proud to ask for help or admit that Emily had been freezing me out for months with little comments and excluded invitations and reasons why I couldn't visit, always delivered with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. The neighbor 3 houses down, Mrs. Patterson, found me stumbling down the driveway about 20 minutes later, soaked through to my bones and shivering so hard I could barely speak, and she pulled me into her warm kitchen and wrapped me in blankets and made me tea while calling me poor dear over and over. "What happened?" she kept asking. "Did you fall? Should I call an ambulance?" But I couldn't tell her the truth, couldn't say that my daughter-in-law had locked me out in a thunderstorm like I was some stray dog that had overstayed its welcome. So I just mumbled something about a misunderstanding and waited until I could feel my fingers again before I asked her to call me a cab. That night in my small apartment across town, the one I'd moved into after selling the family house to help fund Daniel and Emily's dream home, I sat in front of my laptop with my hands still trembling, though no longer from the cold. See, there was something Emily didn't know, something I'd set up months ago when I'd paid to have the security system installed at their new house, the one with cameras at every door and window, because I'd insisted they needed to keep Caleb safe in this neighborhood they didn't know yet. I had remote access to all of it, could pull up the footage from my phone or computer anytime I wanted, and I'd honestly installed it with the best intentions, just wanting to make sure my grandson was protected, but now those cameras were going to serve a very different purpose. I logged into the security system and pulled up the footage from the front porch camera, the timestamp showing exactly when I'd arrived with my arms full of groceries, and the homemade soup I'd made for dinner, thinking I was being helpful since Daniel had texted me that he'd be working late and Emily had mentioned being overwhelmed. I watched myself knock on the door, saw Emily answer with that flash of annoyance crossing her face before she schooled it into something more neutral, heard her say, "Oh Helena, I didn't know you were coming over," even though I'd texted her that morning and she'd responded with a thumbs-up emoji. The footage showed me stepping inside, chatting about the weather, asking where Caleb was, and then it jumped ahead to the moment everything changed, when Emily had suddenly said, I think you should leave now. And I'd looked at her confused because I'd just arrived, and she'd said, Daniel doesn't want you here so much. You're always hovering. And I'd protested that Daniel had never said anything like that, and the argument had escalated until she'd physically pushed me out the door and locked it behind me. The audio was crystal clear, every word captured in perfect detail, including the part where Caleb had started crying and Emily had snapped at him to shut up, and then that final devastating moment when she delivered her verdict through the glass, let the old hag freeze. I played it 3 times, and each time I felt something inside me harden a little more, that soft grandmother part of me that had always made excuses and smoothed things over crystallizing into something sharper and less forgiving. My hands hovered over the keyboard, and I almost sent the video to Daniel right then, almost hit that forward button and let him see what his wife had done, but something stopped me. Maybe it was pride, not wanting to look like I was running to my son to tattle, or maybe it was strategy, some instinct from my years in business telling me that showing my cards too early was a mistake. But whatever it was, I closed the email draft and instead opened a different file, one I hadn't looked at in months. It was the paperwork from the house purchase, the documents my attorney had drawn up when I'd agreed to provide the down payment, and as I read through them, I felt a grim satisfaction starting to build. You see, I hadn't just handed over a check for $100,000 like some naive fool, despite what Emily apparently thought. My attorney, Linda Carver, had insisted on structuring it as a conditional family trust loan, not a gift, with very specific terms attached. The money was tied to the deed, with provisions that allowed me to recall the loan immediately under certain circumstances, including but not limited to elder abuse, hostile exclusion from the property, or evidence of family estrangement initiated by the borrowers. At the time, I'd thought Linda was being overly cautious, maybe even paranoid, but she'd looked at me over her reading glasses and said, Helena, I've been doing this for 30 years, and I've seen too many generous parents get burned by ungrateful children, so humor me and sign the papers with these protections in place. And I'd sign them because what did it matter? I'd never need those provisions anyway because my family loved me. Except they didn't, or at least Emily didn't, and now those provisions were going to be the key to everything. I spent the next day doing research, pulling up precedents and case law, reading through tenant rights and property law until my eyes burned, because even though I had a lawyer, I needed to understand this myself, needed to know exactly what weapons I had in my arsenal. The problem was my temper kept getting in the way, that hot flash of anger that made me want to drive over there right now and confront Emily in person, make her look me in the eye and explain how she could be so cruel, but I knew that would be a mistake. Knew that going in emotional and unprepared would just make me look unhinged and give her ammunition to paint me as the crazy mother-in-law who couldn't let go. So instead I forced myself to wait, to be methodical and careful, even though every instinct screamed at me to do something now. I called Linda Carver the next morning and her secretary put me through immediately. Helena, Linda said, her voice warm and professional. What can I do for you? I took a breath. I need to invoke the provisions in the trust loan agreement for Daniel and Emily's house. There was a pause, then Linda's voice came back more focused, sharper. Tell me what happened. So I did, the whole story spilling out, and when I finished there was silence on the other end of the line. Do you have evidence? Linda asked. Video and audio, I said, from the security cameras I installed. Send it to me, Linda said. I'll review everything and we'll schedule a meeting, but Helena, I need to ask you something first. Are you absolutely sure you want to do this? Once we start this process, there's no going back. Your relationship with Daniel will never be the same. I closed my eyes and saw Caleb's face pressed against that window, saw Emily's cold satisfaction as she delivered her verdict. I'm sure, I said. The next 48 hours were the longest of my life, waiting while Linda reviewed the footage and prepared her case. And during that time, I barely slept because my mind kept spinning through scenarios and possibilities, and all the ways this could go wrong. What if Daniel took Emily's side? What if he chose his wife over his mother, and I lost not just the money but my son and grandson too? What if Emily somehow convinced everyone that I was the villain here, that I'd manipulated the situation, or edited the footage, or made the whole thing up? My stubborn pride told me I was right to fight back, that I couldn't let Emily treat me this way and get away with it. But there was a small voice in the back of my mind, whispering that maybe I should just let it go, take the loss and move on, because wasn't that what mothers were supposed to do? Sacrifice everything for their children, even when their children didn't deserve it. But every time I started to waver, I'd remember Emily's face, remember her saying, let the old hag freeze, while my grandson cried, and the resolve would harden again. Called on the 3rd day. I've prepared everything, she said. The footage is damning, Helena. Any judge would see this as clear elder abuse and hostile exclusion. We have grounds to recall the loan immediately. What happens then? I asked. They'll have 30 days to repay the full amount, Linda said. If they can't, which I'm guessing they can't given their financial situation, the property enters legal recovery proceedings. Essentially, we can force a sale or negotiate a settlement. And Daniel. I asked, what about my son? Linda's voice softened. I think Daniel needs to see this footage, Helena. He needs to know what his wife did. I suggest we schedule a meeting at their house, you, me, Daniel, and Emily, and we present everything at once. Give him a chance to respond before the legal proceedings begin. It felt like a knife twisting in my gut, the thought of Daniel seeing that footage, seeing how his wife had treated his mother, but Linda was right. He deserved to know the truth, even if the truth was going to shatter his marriage. We scheduled the meeting for the following Tuesday at 10 in the morning, a time when Daniel would be home and Caleb would be at school, and Linda insisted on coming to pick me up herself because she said I seemed too shaky to drive, and she was probably right because I hadn't been eating or sleeping properly, and my hands had developed this constant tremor that I couldn't quite control. The drive to the house felt surreal, passing familiar streets and landmarks, pulling into the driveway of the home I'd helped purchase, the home I'd imagined visiting regularly to watch Caleb grow up, to host birthday parties and holiday dinners. All those dreams now turned to ash. Linda carried her briefcase, and I carried nothing because what was there to bring except my wounded dignity and my determination to see this through? Emily answered the door, and her face went through several expressions in rapid succession: surprise, confusion, then something harder and more defensive. What's going on? She said, looking between us. Why is there a lawyer here? Linda smiled, professional and cool. I'm attorney Linda Carver, representing Helena Ward. Is Daniel home? We need to speak with both of you. Emily's eyes narrowed, but she stepped back and let us in, calling for Daniel, who emerged from his home office looking confused and worried. Mom, he said, what's wrong? Are you okay? I couldn't speak, my throat too tight, so Linda took over. Mr. Ward, Mrs. Ward, please have a seat. We have some matters to discuss regarding the financial arrangement for this property. We all sat in the living room, that beautiful space with the hardwood floors and the big windows letting in morning light, the room I'd imagined spending so many happy hours in, and now it felt like a courtroom. Linda opened her briefcase and pulled out a folder, laying it on the coffee table between us. 3 days ago, Helena came to this house to deliver groceries and homemade dinner while you were working late, Daniel, Linda began. What happened next was documented on the security camera system that Helena installed and paid for as a housewarming gift. She pulled out a printed still image from the footage, a screenshot that showed Emily's face twisted in anger and me standing outside in the rain, and placed it in front of them. Emily went pale. What is this? She whispered. This is from your front porch camera, Linda said calmly. Would you like to see the full video? Daniel picked up the screenshot, his hands shaking slightly. I don't understand, he said. Mom, what happened? Linda pulled out her tablet and queued up the footage. Perhaps it's better if you just watch, she said, and pressed play. The next 5 minutes were excruciating, watching Daniel's face as he saw the confrontation unfold, heard his wife tell his mother to leave, saw me get pushed out into the storm, heard every cruel word Emily had spoken. I watched my son's expression change from confusion to horror to something that looked like grief, and when Emily's voice came through the speakers saying, "Let the old hag freeze," with Caleb crying in the background, Daniel's face crumpled. Oh my God, he whispered. Oh my God, Emily, what did you do? Emily lunged forward and grabbed the tablet. This is out of context, she said, her voice rising. She's twisting everything. She was being intrusive and controlling, and I just needed space. You locked my mother out in a thunderstorm, Daniel said, his voice hollow. You called her a hag and told her to freeze. She was hovering, Emily shouted. She's always hovering, always showing up uninvited, always acting like this is her house instead of ours. I texted her that morning, I said quietly, finding my voice finally. You gave me a thumbs up, Emily. I thought you wanted me to come. Emily whirled on me, her composure cracking completely. You're suffocating us, can't you see that? Every time I turn around you're there offering help we didn't ask for, giving advice nobody wants, acting like you're entitled to access to our lives just because you threw some money at us. $100,000 isn't some money, Linda interjected calmly, which brings us to the legal matter at hand. She opened the folder and pulled out more documents. Money Helena provided for your down payment was structured as a conditional family trust loan, not a gift. The conditions included provisions for immediate recall in cases of elder abuse or hostile exclusion from the property. This footage constitutes clear evidence of both. Daniel's head snapped up. What does that mean? It means the loan is now due immediately, Linda said. You have 30 days to repay the full amount of $100,000 plus administrative fees. The color drained from Emily's face. You can't do that, she said. We don't have that kind of money. Then the property will enter legal recovery proceedings, Linda said. We can force a sale or negotiate a settlement. This is insane. Emily stood up, her hands balling into fists. You're going to take our house because I asked for some boundaries, because I wanted some space from my controlling mother-in-law. You didn't ask for boundaries, I said, and I was surprised by how steady my voice sounded, how calm I felt now that we were finally here, finally having this conversation that had been building for months. You humiliated me, Emily. You locked me out in a storm and told me I'd served my purpose. You made my grandson watch while you called me a hag and said you hoped I'd freeze. That's not asking for boundaries, that's cruelty. You're being dramatic, Emily said, but her voice wavered. Caleb was fine, he didn't understand what was happening. He understood enough to cry, I said. He understood enough to be traumatized. Daniel stood up and walked to the window, his back to all of us, and when he spoke his voice was tight with emotion. How could you do this, Emily? How could you treat my mother this way? Oh, don't act like you're innocent in this, Emily spun on him. You're the one who's always complaining about how much time she takes up, how she's always calling and texting and wanting to visit. You're the one who said we needed to set better boundaries. I never said to lock her out in a storm, Daniel shouted, turning around. I never said to be cruel to her. Christ, Emily, what is wrong with you? What's wrong with me? Emily's voice went shrill. What's wrong with you, Daniel? You're such a coward you can't even stand up to your own mother. You just let her walk all over us, let her control everything with her money and her guilt trips, and now she's literally trying to take our house because I finally had the spine to tell her no. This isn't about telling her no, Daniel said. This is about basic human decency. This is about treating family with respect. She's not my family. Emily screamed, she's your family, and I'm sick of pretending that her wants and needs come before mine in my own house. The silence that followed was deafening, and I could see Linda taking notes on her legal pad, documenting everything, building her case. I wanted to feel triumphant, wanted to enjoy watching Emily's mask slip and her true nature emerge, but instead I just felt tired and sad and old. Emily, I said quietly, I never wanted to control you. Just wanted to be part of my grandson's life. Well, you've ruined that now, haven't you? Emily said, and there were tears on her face, angry tears that made her makeup run. You've destroyed everything because you couldn't handle being told you're not wanted. That's enough, Linda said firmly. Mrs. Ward, I strongly suggest you consult with your own attorney before saying anything else. These proceedings are now formally initiated, and anything you say can and will be used in legal documentation. Emily laughed, a broken sound. Of course you have a lawyer and a plan and all your evidence lined up. You probably planned this from the beginning, didn't you? Put in those cameras just so you could spy on us, set up that loan agreement just so you could use it against us later. I put in the cameras to keep Caleb safe, I said, and I set up the loan agreement because my attorney insisted on protecting my interests, which clearly was the right call. Get out, Emily said. Both of you get out of my house right now. Actually, Linda said, still perfectly calm, this is partially Helena's house, legally speaking, until the loan is satisfied, so we'll leave when we're ready to leave. Daniel moved toward the door. I'll walk you out, he said quietly, not looking at Emily. Daniel, don't you dare, Emily warned. I mean it if you side with her over me. You locked my mother out in a thunderstorm, Daniel repeated, and his voice broke. You called her a hag and told her to freeze while our son watched and cried. How am I supposed to side with you on that, Emily? How am I supposed to pretend that's okay? Emily's face crumpled and she sank back onto the couch, covering her face with her hands, and I almost felt sorry for her, except I remembered Caleb's little hands pressed against the glass, and the feeling of cold rain soaking through my coat. We left, Daniel walking us to Linda's car, and when we got there he turned to me with tears on his face. Mom, I'm so sorry, he said. I swear I didn't know she was treating you like that. I know, sweetheart, I said, and I hugged him because he was still my son, still my boy, even if he'd failed to protect me from his wife. I know you didn't know. What happens now? He asked. Linda answered. You have 30 days to come up with $100,000 or negotiate a settlement. Given your financial situation, I'd recommend speaking with a mediator about options. We're going to lose the house, Daniel said numbly. Aren't we? That depends on what Emily's willing to agree to, Linda said, and whether you want to stay married to someone capable of that kind of cruelty. Daniel flinched like she'd slapped him. I have a son to think about, he said. I can't just blow up his life. His life is already blown up, I said gently. Caleb watched that whole thing happen, Daniel. He watched his mother lock his grandmother out in a storm. You think he's going to forget that? Daniel didn't answer, just stood there in the driveway of the house I'd helped him buy, looking lost and broken, and I got in Linda's car and let her drive me away. The next 3 weeks were a blur of phone calls and legal documents and tense negotiations, with Emily refusing to speak to me directly, and Daniel caught in the middle trying to broker some kind of peace. Linda was relentless, presenting option after option, all of which boiled down to the same basic truth. They owed me $100,000 and they didn't have it. Emily proposed a payment plan that would have taken 20 years to satisfy, which Linda rejected. She suggested we forgive part of the loan in exchange for guaranteed visitation rights with Caleb, which I actually considered until Linda pointed out that trying to force family relationships through legal contracts was a recipe for disaster. Finally, 2 days before the 30-day deadline, Daniel called me directly. Mom, he said, and his voice sounded exhausted. We need to talk. We met at a coffee shop halfway between our places, neutral ground, and when Daniel walked in he looked like he'd aged 10 years in 3 weeks. Emily and I are separating, he said without preamble. I filed for divorce yesterday. I felt my heart crack a little even though I'd known it was coming. "Oh, Daniel," I said, "I'm so sorry." "Don't be," he said. "You were right about all of it." I've been blind, making excuses for her behavior for years, because it was easier than confronting it. But I can't anymore, not after what she did to you, and honestly not after some of the things she said since then. "What did she say?" I asked. Daniel's jaw tightened. "She told me that if I chose you over her, I'd regret it for the rest of my life. She said she'd make sure I never saw Caleb again, that she'd poison him against both of us, that she'd tell everyone you were abusive and controlling, and that I was too weak to stand up to you." "Can she do that?" I asked. "Can she keep you from seeing Caleb?" "She can try," Daniel said. "I've got a good attorney, and frankly, after I showed him that security footage, he's pretty confident we can get shared custody. No judge is going to look favorably on Emily after seeing what she did." "And the house?" I asked. "We are selling," Daniel said. "The market's good right now, and we should be able to pay you back the full amount and split whatever's left over. It won't be much after the mortgage and fees, but it's better than foreclosure." I reached across the table and took his hand. "I never wanted to destroy your marriage, Daniel," I said. "I just wanted her to treat me with basic respect." "I know, Mom," he said, "and I should have stood up for you a long time ago. I should have seen what she was doing and stopped it. That's on me." We sat there for a while, drinking coffee that had gone cold, and eventually Daniel said, "Caleb asks about you every day, you know. He wants to see you." "Can he?" I asked. "Does Emily allow it?" "Emily's living at her mother's place right now," Daniel said. "When Caleb's with me, you can see him whenever you want." The house sold 6 weeks later for more than they'd expected, and after all the fees and the mortgage payoff, I received my $100,000 back plus a small settlement for legal fees, and Daniel and Emily split the remaining equity, which gave each of them about $30,000, enough for security deposits and moving expenses and starting over. I helped Daniel find a decent 2-bedroom apartment near Caleb's school, even offered to help with his deposit, though Linda warned me against it, said I needed to stop trying to solve problems with money, and she was probably right. Emily moved back to her hometown 3 hours away, which complicated the custody arrangement, but the court gave Daniel primary custody after reviewing the security footage and interviewing Caleb, who told the child's psychologist that his mommy had been mean to grandma, and it made him sad. I got to see Caleb every week, sometimes more. And slowly the fear and confusion in his eyes faded, and he went back to being a happy 7-year-old who loved dinosaurs and building blocks and bedtime stories. Daniel and I rebuilt our relationship too, though it looked different now, more honest and with clearer boundaries, both of us understanding that love didn't mean unlimited access or unconditional support for bad behavior. The thing nobody tells you about revenge is that it doesn't feel the way you think it will, doesn't give you that clean, satisfying sense of justice served and wrongs righted. Instead, it's complicated and messy, and leaves you with a tangle of emotions you can't quite sort through, triumph mixed with grief, mixed with guilt, mixed with relief. I'd won technically, gotten my money back and exposed Emily's cruelty and protected my relationship with my grandson, but I'd also lost the vision of the future I'd been holding on to, the dream of a happy extended family and Sunday dinners and everyone getting along. And there were moments, late at night when I couldn't sleep, when I wondered if my pride and my stubbornness had made things worse, if I should have just accepted Emily's boundaries and backed off and tried to work things out differently. But then I'd remember standing on that porch in the freezing rain, remember Caleb's face pressed against the glass, remember Emily's voice saying, "Let the old hag freeze," and I'd know I'd made the right choice, because some things you just can't let go, some cruelties you can't forgive or forget or move past without demanding accountability. 6 months after everything settled, I got a call from an unknown number, and when I answered, Emily's voice came through the speaker, tight and controlled. "Helena," she said, "I wanted you to know I'm engaged." "Congratulations," I said, meaning it. "I hope you'll be happy." "I am happy," she said. "Happier than I ever was with Daniel, actually. My fiancé understands me in ways your son never did." "That's good," I said. "Really, Emily, I mean that." There was a pause, then she said, "I also wanted to say that I think you were right about some things. Not everything, but some things. I was cruel that night and I shouldn't have been. It was the closest thing to an apology I was likely to get, and I accepted it for what it was." "Thank you for saying that," I told her. "And for what it's worth, I'm sorry too. Sorry that things ended the way they did. Sorry that we couldn't find a way to coexist peacefully." "We're very different people," Emily said. "We were never going to get along." "Maybe not," I agreed, "but I wish you well anyway." After we hung up, I sat with the phone in my hand for a long time, thinking about second chances and fresh starts and the complicated nature of family relationships. And then Caleb came running in from the kitchen where Daniel was making dinner, his hands covered in flour and his face bright with excitement. Grandma, we're making pizza and Daddy says I can put whatever toppings I want on mine," he announced, and I pulled him into my lap, getting flour all over my clothes and not caring one bit. "That sounds perfect," I told him, and meant it, because this right here, this moment with my grandson safe and happy and loved, This was worth every bit of pain and conflict and loss it had taken to get here. The real twist came 8 months later when Daniel showed up at my apartment looking nervous and excited at the same time. "Mom," he said, "I need to tell you something and I need you to promise not to freak out." My stomach dropped because that's never how good news starts. "What is it?" I asked. "I'm seeing someone," he said. "Someone serious, and she wants to meet you." "Daniel, that's wonderful," I said, relief flooding through me. "Why would I freak out about that?" "Because she has 2 kids from her previous marriage, and she's been really clear that she needs to know you're going to respect her boundaries and not try to be too involved or controlling. And I told her about everything that happened with Emily, and she's worried that you might try to buy her affection with money or push your way into decisions that aren't yours to make." I took a breath, feeling my pride bristle at the implications, but then I forced myself to really hear what he was saying. "She's protecting her children," I said slowly, "the way any good mother would." "Exactly," Daniel said, "and I need you to understand that this time things are going to be different. I'm going to set clear boundaries from the start, and I need you to respect them, even when it's hard, even when you think you know better." It stung hearing my own son essentially tell me I'd been part of the problem with Emily, that my helpfulness and generosity had crossed lines I hadn't recognized, but he wasn't wrong. "Okay," I said, "I hear you and I'll respect whatever boundaries you and your girlfriend set. But Daniel, I need you to promise me something too." "What?" he asked. "Promise me that if she ever treats you or Caleb with cruelty, if she ever crosses the line from setting healthy boundaries into abuse or manipulation, you'll recognize it and address it immediately. Don't make excuses, don't try to keep the peace at the expense of basic human dignity." Daniel's eyes got wet and he nodded. "I promise, Mom, I really do." And somehow, standing there in my little apartment that would never be anyone's dream home but was mine and enough, I felt something close to peace settle over me, because maybe the real revenge wasn't destroying Emily's life or getting my money back. Maybe it was learning the lessons embedded in all that pain and doing better next time, being wiser and clear-eyed and more aware of my own flaws and failings, while still refusing to accept cruelty as the price of being included in my family's life.